Hello friends. People keep asking me how to make sourdough, so I thought I would just make a video and show you. This isn't going to be frilly or fancy because I ain't like that. What I do is I have starter. I got starter from my friend Cassidy. I didn't make my own. You can look online how to make your own. I haven't done that, so I would just say get some from somebody. You only need a little bit. So if you were getting starter from somebody, you could just put a little bit into a jar, like even just a tiny bit would work. And then it's kind of sticky. And then you would just have a little bit in your jar and then you feed it. So when you feed it matters. I usually, like, if I want to make sourdough in a certain day, I'll make sure that my starter, this is called starter, and it's just flour and water that has been, I don't know, I guess fermented, or it's had time to grow bacteria, and it's a healthy bacteria that kind of, I don't know if you see the bubbles, but it gives rise to bread rather than using yeast. So really that's the only difference between sourdough recipes and other recipes, is that, and some have yeast as well, but you're using this as your raising agent or leavening agent. So I just get some flour, and there are different ratios you can do. The more flour and water you add, the longer it's going to take for it to get all bubbly, because it's going to take longer for the active starter to like eat up and bubble up and eat the flour and water. I don't measure, I don't weigh it, I just wing it. This is unbleached flour. It's Lehigh Roller Mills from Costco. This is the bread flour kind, but you can use all-purpose flour. I've used both in my starter and it's been fine. Most things I've read say to use unbleached. So then I put in some flour, and then I'm going to add some water. Again, I don't really measure. You just usually try to do like 1 part to 1 part flour and like equal parts flour and water. And then I just try to get it to the texture of like a muffin mix. So thicker than pancake mix, kind of like a muffin mix. I don't know if you can tell. But that's what I do. And then I just use a butter knife, I stir it around, and then I put a rubber band on it so that I can keep track of how high the starter is, or like where I started at. You can't really tell from the side of the jar, but this is about how full it is right now. And I'll put one on this one down low where it's at, and then I can make sure that it's active and alive, because you don't want to start bread with a starter that isn't growing. I've had mine for a long time, and maybe a year, maybe, and I haven't killed it yet. It's pretty hard to kill. It's just bacteria, flour, and water. Don't be scared of it. Worst case, you get more from whoever you got the first batch from, or you try making your own starter. Anyway, it's not too bad. When you're not going to use starter, you put it in the fridge, and I always cover. It will dry out if you don't cover it. I just leave it loose. Like, I just set the lid on and put it in my fridge when I'm not using it. Like if I'm going on a trip, or I know I don't want to make bread that week, I throw it in the fridge, and you just feed it once a week. Sometimes I feed it right when I put it in the fridge. Sometimes I throw it in as is and feed it at the end of the week. And then if you feel like you're going to be baking with it more regularly, I just leave it on the counter, and it can stay on the counter if you feed it every day. So what that entails is adding more flour and water. So if it were this much, I would probably add like maybe double that in flour and water. Sometimes I add more, sometimes I add less. If I want to make, usually I do a quadruple batch of sourdough. So I want like a full jar. This is the bigger size mason jar. I will fill it like halfway so that it should double once it's activated, and once that starter has time to grow. So this is about as much as you need for like a quadruple batch of round loaves of sourdough. Different recipes obviously will vary. It will get smelly if you don't feed it. The smellier it is, the more it's hungry. So feed it some flour and water. If you feed it flour and water and it doesn't really rise, dump most of it out, I found, and start over. Even if you end up using all the starter that you have and all you have left is a little bit along the sides, you can add flour and water and just kind of scrape it and incorporate it, and it will still grow. You don't have to have a lot in here to be able to feed it. It will grow from a very little amount of starter left in the jar. Every once in a while I put it into like a fresh jar so that it's not, because it will kind of dry out around the edges. It's not a big deal. If you haven't fed your starter for a while, whether it's in the fridge or outside, and it starts to get some like brown liquid buildup on the top, that's called hooch. It's not bad. It's actually really good for your gut. You just need to feed it. That just means it's really hungry, and it will probably be really smelly. So just feed it and try to get it healthy again. The less you feed it, the less quickly it's going to grow. If you're feeding it every day, it's going to respond and grow and get bubbly really quickly. Depends on what you want to do with it. So when to feed it, usually if I feed it flour and water, and I just have a little bit in the bottom, and I feed it a bunch of flour and water, I'm usually ready by like 11 or 12 or like noon. If I start in the morning, feed it at maybe 5 or 6, it's ready by like noon. So it takes a while for it to activate. So sometimes though, if I feed it the night before, it's already starting to decline or like shrink back down by the time I'm ready to make it in the morning. So I find if I start really early and then do it midday, that works for me. And I can tell you more about time schedules.